new faces, a lot of old faces. One of the best things I like about this time that we have together.
Here are so many great testimonies.
Test. Is this going to work or not?
It works fine.
Test, kind of. Is that more? Test. All right, that's a lot better. I can just tell. All right, let's open with a word of prayer. We got a lot to talk about tonight. Abba, Father, we just come to you humbly in prayer tonight, and we just look forward to this conference that you put together. Father, it was mentioned already that the city of Bentonville helped foot some of this bill, and it's an amazing thing to see government money going to praise you and learn about your word. So, Father, we just ask that we would use it wisely so that you would continue to bestow those blessings upon your people so that we could spread your word and the knowledge of your coming kingdom. Father, we just ask your blessing upon all of this, upon the families who have come here and upon the families who have helped arrange all this and put this together, and that you would give special blessings for each and every one of them. And Father, when it's all over, that we would go home with a fire. We would go home with a fire that would carry on to our families and to our neighbors and our friends. And Father, it would all be for your glory. We have asked all that in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Okay. So a lot's happened since I was here last year. And I really want to start off by just thanking every one of you for your prayers. Because I had so many people come and tell me that, so thank you. She left an amazing testimony. She's an amazing woman. So thank you for all that. What you're about to see tonight is something that me and her brainstormed together. And that was the thing I think that's the most painful, is having that partner, that person that you can bounce ideas off of. And so this is something we put together, and as I do most of my presentations, I tell people, starting off from the very beginning, when it comes to this sort of topic, I don't know. And so I just want to brainstorm with you. Because, I've already had a few people come up to me tonight, and they're giving me their ideas, and they're, talking about things, and I go home and I chew on those things, and I look up in the Word, and I compare everything to Scripture. And so I really do learn a lot from you guys. So thank you for that. I want you to share with me. I'm not some high-end, person that can't be approached. I learn from you guys. I'm just a regular schmo, and I'm just trying to do the best I can in this life and praise the Father along the way. So what you're about to see is just my opinion. I'm going to use Scripture to back up my opinion, and then we'll see what the Father does with that. I don't even know if I agree with everything here. Things can change. But what we're going to talk about tonight is just the state of our world. It's a mess out there right now. I'm sure you can tell. You have this coronavirus going around. We've got sickness and disease and our government and election coming up, and the world's pulling you in 100 million different directions. Why is that? And people will come to you and they'll say, but it's always been this way. It's always been this way. You just didn't know about it before. Everyone thought it was going to be the last days when it was their generation. There's a difference. The sin is outward. It's open. It's in your face. It's never been like that before. Never been like this before. So we're going to talk about some things tonight, and I titled this Mightier Than We. Mightier Than We, from that verse we'll get to in a second in Exodus. But it's a part 4 of my Greater Exodus series. And it's just me looking at what we're facing in the world today as a body of believers. The following presentation may depress you and cause you to feel hopeless. But I'm here to tell you that there is hope. Okay, it's not all depression. Okay, there is a reason for our joy, and we need to hold on to that. As I start off all my presentations, I'm not a teacher, I'm a student. I don't like being called a teacher. I want to learn. The learning is never going to stop. So that's how I see myself, as a student, not a teacher. I hope I learn as much from you as you learn from me. We're all new to Torah. No one's ever going to be old to Torah. Moses might qualify, but that's it. The rest of us, we're new to Torah. And I reserve the right to be wrong about everything. Is that causing feedback? I reserve the right to be wrong about everything you're about to see. Again, just my opinion. I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from, and then we're going to go from there, and I'm going to make my case. I give it up front. And always, hindsight and prophecy is always 20/20. Amen. Our Messiah told us to watch. He said, watch. It's impossible to watch without speculating about what it is you're watching. Amen. So we're free to speculate. And we're going to have lots of different opinions about what it is we're seeing in the world and how it relates to us and how it relates to the coming of our Messiah. So let's watch and let's talk about it. Will there be a physical greater exodus? So this is something that's come up for the last couple of years. And there are people who say, no, Zach, this is just a resurrection event. This is a spiritual event. It's not physical. We're not going to be walking anywhere. We're not going to be going anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, was the dispersion a physical event? Then the regathering will also be a physical event. Amen. He did that. Why? He says, to show them my glory, to show them my power. And what happened? We'll go over the verse later, where it talks about they rejected him 10 times. They tested him 10 times. Even though he showed his glory in Egypt, and he showed his power in the wilderness, and they still tested him. He's going to test the world. He's going to show his glory. He's going to show his power. And we're all going to have front row seats, hopefully. This is going to be a physical, greater exodus. It will be physical. You will see it, or your children will see it, or your children's children. Someone's going to see it. And we're going to do it, just like the first time. So I like to start off with this verse. It's Deuteronomy 30, verse 1. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, you shall call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord thy God has driven you. Okay, so this is a physical event. It's detailed in the Scripture. You can read about it in the book of Lamentations. They go there. They're driven there to these nations. They're crying along the way. They're weeping. They're asking the Father. And he says, I hear you. I'm not even hearing you. And it's a physical event. And you shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command you this day, you and your children, and with all your heart and with all your soul. There'll be people who come and tell you that the state of Israel, 1948, this is the regathering. The problem is there's no obedience there yet. There's some. There's obedience everywhere in a little bit. But that nation is doing about 50,000 government-paid abortions every year. They have the second largest gay pride parade in the world in Tel Aviv. There's an issue with obedience, just like there is all over the rest of the world. But this says, they shall obey his voice. So this tells you this hasn't happened yet. It's coming. And then the Lord thy God will turn your captivity, where he has driven you in all these nations, and have compassion upon you, and will return and gather you from all the nations where the Lord thy God has scattered you. He's going to bring us back. That's our hope. That's our joy. And I believe that our Messiah is going to be leading that charge. Is that my phone? That's your phone. Oh, wait. I didn't turn my phone off. Okay. If any of you be driven out to the outermost parts of heaven, from there the Lord thy God will gather you, and from there he will fetch you. So it doesn't matter how far away you are. It doesn't matter where you are in life. If you're his, he'll get you. That's a physical getting. It's a physical regathering. No matter where you are, I'm going to get you. And I'm going to bring you back. And the Lord thy God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will do you good and multiply you above your fathers. Why you above your fathers? Because they failed, or you will succeed. So, okay, you sound good, Dustin. Jeremiah 16:14. This is another one we go to. We're talking about the greater exodus. We're doing a little bit of a review here if you haven't gathered yet. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord lives who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. Okay, so in that verse, I don't know why I didn't put the second part of that verse. It's going to be a second one that's not talked. It overshadows the first one. It's so much greater. They don't even talk about the first time Moses brought the people out of Egypt. No, we're going to talk about the time where he brings us out of the four corners of the earth. In the Jeremiah 23, I love this verse. Verse 3, but I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them and bring them back to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. Out of all the countries. See, this is a physical event. And then verse 7, this is the one, we always talk about, like Jeremiah 16. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that they shall no longer say, as the Lord lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives, who brought and led the descendants of the house of Israel from the north country and from all the countries where I have driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. So it's going to be bigger. It's going to be a physical event. Now, Messiah said in Matthew 15:24, I come not but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's what's been talked about right here. That's who he's coming for. He's coming for the lost sheep. See, there's a sheep fold out there that still remembers who they are. They have that knowledge. Jacob gave the blessing to Judah and says, the lawgiver shall not depart from between his feet. He'll keep hold of who he is. But the rest of them, they'll be great. Not as powerful, but many amongst the nations. They'll be great amongst the nations. For them, I'm coming. The lost sheep who forgot who they were. Behold, Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31:8, behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth, among them the blind and the lame, and the woman with child, and the one who labors with child, together a great throng shall return there. I've had people come up to me and say, Zach, what about me? I'm in a wheelchair, or I can't walk very good. This can't be. That's one of the big reasons behind this whole physical thing. They don't like to do the physical. Because it requires something of you. It's going to require some effort. And in our Western world today, it's gimme, 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 gimme. I want everything handed to me. I want everything to be easy. If it's not at Walmart, I should be able to order it through Amazon. Right? And if it's at Walmart, I should be able to pick it up in the parking lot. I don't even have to go inside. It's easy. I want it to be easy. And you're talking about actually putting my shoes on? No, Zach, this is spiritual. It's a resurrection event. Come on, we don't have to do anything. A great throng shall return there. And it's going to bring the blind and the lame, the woman with child, the one who labors with child. They're all going to be together. That is amazing to think about. That means all of us, no matter what our condition, when this happens, we're going to go. And that'll be part of the miracle. He said he didn't wear those shoes out for 40 years. That's a miracle. I hope nobody's wearing Nikes. Okay, they shall come with weeping and with supplications, and will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way which they shall not stumble. And then, so they're going to come weeping. Why? Because they're going to be grateful. They're going to be full of joy. It's going to be tears of joy. And then verse in 37 and chapter 32, the next chapter says, behold, I will gather them from all the countries where I have driven them in my anger and in my fury and in great wrath, and I will bring them back to this place, and I will cause them to dwell in safety. This is like the first Exodus. He brought them out with fierce anger, not towards them, but for the Egyptians. It was for Pharaoh. He's going to do it again, the second time. And we're going to see that anger and fury. And he's going to bring us back to dwell. Jeremiah 33:7. And I will cause the captives of Judah, the captives of Israel, to return, and we will rebuild those places as at the first. Like the first time. We're going to rebuild a second time like they did the first time. This is a physical event. Did they build with physical things last time? Yes. We're going to rebuild a physical homes and cities, because things are going to be destroyed, I believe. So how are we going to rebuild all this? It's going to be a physical event. And notice it says in that verse, the captives of Israel, or captives of Judah and the captives of Israel. There's two houses there. two groups. Isaiah 11:11, this is really probably my all-time favorite Greater Exodus verse. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time, to recover the remnant of his people who are left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and the islands of the sea. And there will be a highway for the remnant of his people, who will be left from Assyria, as it was for Israel in the day that he came up from the land of Egypt. And I make the point with some other verses in my other past talks about the Greater Exodus. They crossed over the Red Sea. We're going to cross over oceans this time. There are verses that basically let you lead to that conclusion. We're going to cross over oceans. If it's going to be a Greater Exodus, it's going to be a Greater Exodus. If it's going to be talked about more than the first one, then greater things are going to happen. So mightier than we. So let's go ahead and go explore that verse of where we get the title for this presentation. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there be a falling out or any war, they join also to our enemies and fight against us and take them up out of the land. Mightier than we. Now, we're going to explore some similarities between what we see now, and what we see in this verse. It's amazing to me how many similarities. But just a quick review of what I believe. And again, this is all for just my speculation, just my opinion. There will be a Greater Exodus. It will be a physical event. I believe it will be 144,000 children to lead it. And I go over detail on why in my second part of that series. The children will be in one accord. They'll all have the same unity. There won't be any discussions of calendar days or geography. It's all going to be the same. They will yield massive amounts of power. If you're obedient in the camp, you'll remain in the camp. If you're not, out you go. 144,000 groups of people that begin to merge together as they move through the earth and become one large group. Because we're all scattered. He says, you will be many amongst the nations. Well, there's not one Moses this time. You've got to have someone who can lead that. Many people who can lead all those groups. That's who I believe will do it. The Joel 2 army is the Greater Exodus? Question mark? I don't know. But I tell you what, you compare Numbers chapter 22 and Joel 2, there's a whole lot of similarities right there that are described the same way. Jeremiah 16:14. So again, therefore, behold, the days come, says the Lord, that it shall no more be said, the Lord lives, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And there's our verse 15. But the Lord lives, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he has driven them, and I will bring them again, into their land that I gave unto their fathers. It's a Greater Exodus. Now, I said before in my other presentations, this is just my horse in the race. You're at Churchill Downs, it's a Kentucky Derby, and you got to bet on a horse. That's why you're there. You're betting on a horse. I'm not a gambler. It's actually for gambling. When's our next conference going to be in Vegas? Don't spread rumors, folks. But it's the best analogy I can come up with. All right, you're at Churchill Downs. It's a Kentucky Derby. You bet on a horse. The race starts and your horse falls dead on the racetrack. You pick a new horse. Okay? This is just my horse. All of this series is just a horse in the race when it comes to the Greater Exodus. I'm just going by what I see in Scripture. But there's a lot of great other ideas out there. Listen to all, follow none. That's what I tell people. Listen to all, follow none. All right? I'm just a man and I'm fallible. Just like all of you guys are. We're all fallible. We're not perfect. We're just trying to get by the best we can by looking at Scripture. I grew up playing chess. Anybody play chess? Any chess players? Excellent. Because when you play chess, the way you win at chess, the player who wins at chess is the player who can look at the board and start doing calculations in so many moves ahead of their opponent. So if I can pick a strategy based on 3 moves ahead of my opponent, and my opponent is only playing move to move, I'm going to beat that opponent. You look at the board and you calculate what's the best way to win that game. It's a great way to build up having a mind strategy for your children. Have your children play chess. Because they'll apply that same thinking towards everything else in their life based on where they're at in life. Let's look where you're at in life, you take a look at your chessboard, and then you move accordingly. So, if that's the case, and some of the brightest strategic minds on the planet get that way from playing that game, what do you think the enemy's doing? He knows you try to stay ahead of your opponent. And he knows he's going to lose against God. Okay, that's no doubt. But you see, he's fighting us. When you go out and you play golf, you don't play against the other players with you, you play against the course. He's playing against us. Okay? So playing against us, he's looking at the chessboard. He's saying, okay, how can I get ahead of my opponent? I went over this verse and I think the third presentation, it's a microphone issue. Test. I'm kind of like putting tension on the wire to keep it going. Okay, so I think it was in part 3 I talked about this. Everything that opens the matrix in all flesh, which they bring unto the Lord, whether it be of men or beast, it shall be mine. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man you shall surely redeem, and the firstling of an unclean beast you shall surely redeem. So that means man and like a donkey or a horse. So unclean beast. You redeem those. Because you can't sacrifice those. Right? So they're redeemed. But that word matrix is really interesting when you look into it. In the Hebrew, it's rahem. And maybe, how do I have the sound of that? Rahem. You can't do that stuff these days. People worry about viruses and stuff. Okay, so womb, you got 21 times. It's translated in the King James. I'm just going by the King James. Okay, so in King James, it's translated 21 times as womb. Okay, and 5 times as matrix. You ever look at that? Like, why does it say matrix? Because all you think about is the movie. What is a matrix? It's a cervix. What part of the woman's womb opens and closes to allow conception? It's the cervix. It's the rahim. So clearly from Scripture, we have something that's being opened and closed. And I talked about in that video the attack that we have today on children. The attack today that we have on children. There has never been a time in our history. I mentioned last year when I was here that we talked about the book of Enoch. And people have asked me, Zach, when are you going to put that on your website? I haven't gotten to it yet. I had a whole year full of nonsense I had to get through. But I'm going to at some point. But it's the only book that would have been in your Bible, or that was in your Bible back to the turn of the 1st century, that talked about abortion twice. And today, both my children were born through C-section. I'm sure a lot of you had children born through C-section. But did you know there's a documentary out now? It's called The Business of Being Born. And then they did a part 2, Business of Being Born part 2. Ricky Lake, right? What was the whole point? It was talking about a Western society, Western culture that's moving away from natural childbirth and into C-sections, into the cesarean. It bypasses the rahim. Does that play a part in that at all? I don't know, but it's really weird that the Western world is moving it, that's so into abortion and so into hurting our children, is bypassing the rahim for birth of our children. Bypassing the matrix, bypassing the cervix. Because my children did not come through the cervix. They did surgery and removed our children. Does that somehow disqualify them? I don't know, but the Father means things when He says them. He says you're going to have these children, and He talks about the matrix or the rahim over 26 times in Scripture. There's an importance there. Does it disqualify them as being used for a purpose later on? He disqualifies other people from being used for purposes later on. For instance, an animal that's had the burden on its back for working. You can't use that animal for certain things anymore. The red heifer is one of those. There's things that disqualify you from doing something that the Father has set apart for something that has not gone through that experience. Could the enemy, playing chess, be figuring out ways to not use our children for a purpose in the end days? Maybe. I don't know. Again, I'm looking at the chessboard. The attack on children, I think, consists of abortion, school influence. How many of you guys are homeschoolers? Yeah. But, I mean, when I was a kid, like, nobody did that. And they're doing it everywhere today. Why? Come on, parents, why? All kinds of different answers. There's lots of reasons why. It's because there's a bunch of nonsense out there. You know, we've seen what happens when you put your kids in that nonsense. A lot of times they go astray. Because the world is a very attractive place. And so, school influence. It's an attack on kids. You know, there are people who they graduate high school, they've lived their whole life in youth group, they go to church their whole life with their families, they go to college, we send them to state college, we're so happy. They're going to go to college. They got accepted into whatever university. And there are professors out there just waiting to grab a hold of them and show them just how wrong the Bible really is. Because if you don't know your contradictions or supposed contradictions in Scripture, they will make it look really valid. They'll make it look real. And they're just waiting out there for your kids to step into their classrooms. Because they're going to destroy the Bible. And they come back, and they're all kinds of messed up. All kinds of new ideas. Pop culture. Our music, our movies, our entertainment. It's all there and it's geared towards children, a lot of it. Most of it. And I know I harp on Disney quite a lot. But man, they're getting worse and worse. And I know they come out with their first LGBTQ, whatever, MLP character. It's a mess out there. It's a mess. You saw that guy with Pete, whatever, Buttigieg, whatever, you know, the 9-year-old boy? It's a world of mess. It's geared towards kids. See, here's this 9-year-old boy. Look how brave he is. Don't you want to be brave? It's a mess. And it's all geared towards kids. The attack on the family. The attack on the family. There are so many attacks on the family today. Why? What do families produce? Kids. Oh, we're going to go through some news articles today. So my Chick-fil-A story. I have a Chick-fil-A story. Don't you all have Chick-fil-A stories? So, Caleb had his accident. I know you guys remember that. It was on, we talked about that. Thank you for your prayers on that too. It was just a miracle. My youngest, Caleb, when he was 5 years old, was out riding his bicycle in the front yard. He slipped and fell on his handlebars, and had to go to the ER, and I'm glad we did because he had internal bleeding, massive internal bleeding, and they had to remove his spleen. And they had to give him a number of blood transfusions. They had to fly him to a better hospital, and it was close. But he made it through, and so it was all great. But we spent a week in the ICU, just a mess, so we stayed there a long time. But anyway, we left the hospital at some point after however long we were there, and we're leaving the hospital. We got discharged at noon. It's Springfield, Missouri. Springfield, Missouri. Anybody here from Springfield, Missouri? Help people? Okay, great. Awesome. You can go and verify this after we're done here. So, Springfield, Missouri, we get out of the hospital. It's 12 noon, and I turn to Jamie. I said, you know, I'm hungry. Are you hungry? She's like, yeah. I'm like, where are we going to go? We got like a 3-hour drive to get back home or more. 3.5 hour, whatever it was. And she's like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? I said, well, is there a Chick-fil-A? So I pull up my phone. I Google Chick-fil-A, and there's 3 of them. 3 of them within a mile of the hospital. 3 of them within a mile of the hospital in Springfield, Missouri. I mean, that's just crazy to me. And there's that many. The 3 Chick-fil-A. So we go to the Chick-fil-A that's south of the hospital because we're going south anyway. We get to the Chick-fil-A. We pull up, and there's a line coming out the door. Line coming out the door. People standing there waiting to get into the Chick-fil-A. I was like, wow. I said, well, let's just go. I don't want to go anywhere else. We couldn't eat fast food. We're not fast food people. We don't eat out a lot. Usually I'll go to Subway. It's like, okay, if we're here, let's just stand in line. It looks like it's moving pretty fast. So we go up there, we stand in line. We stood in line for 20 minutes. I got a kid who just got out of the hospital. He's not feeling the greatest. But we stood in line for 20 minutes with a whole bunch of other people that stood in line for 20 minutes to get fast food chicken. And so we go through the line, we get our food. They were pretty quick. You know, it was 20 minutes, but it was fast. And we got through the line, we did our order, and sat down. Had to wait for our family to get up so we could sit down at a table. And sat down at the table, and pretty quickly they had our food out to us. You know, they definitely have a great system in place. So I'm looking around, eating our food, and I'm looking at all the families. Lots of families. There's no single people sitting there at the table by themselves eating. I'm looking up at the walls, and there's Bible verses on the walls. Framed Bible verses on the walls at the Springfield, Chick-fil-A, South of the hospital. I don't know what the other ones that are doing to those. And I'm looking at this, and it's families. And there's Bible verses on the walls. And people willing to wait 20 minutes to stand in line for some gross, unhealthy, fast food. Why? I'll tell you why. It's because the family today is under attack. And there are people who will make the sacrifice of standing in line for 20 minutes and eat in a completely overly crowded, room with a whole bunch of other people they don't know, because they feel a camaraderie there, because we're all under attack. And so we all go to the same places so that we can feel like we belong again. That's why people stood in line for 20 minutes waiting for their chicken, because they understand that the family is under attack. And here they have camaraderie. We have that thing that we can share, that one thing that brings us together. And there's Bible verses on the wall. And there's Christian music playing that worships God, our Father, over the loudspeakers in that restaurant. It's a haven. You get that? Because there's very few places like that in our world today. And so where those places exist, people will go. Now we have the recent issue with them kind of going over into the dark side. Because they did. They hired a former Hillary Clinton fundraiser supporter into their management, and they changed things. And they're trying to get into politics here. I'm trying to make the point that the family's under attack. And that, see, when we go to places like this, I love Sukkot. How many people don't love Sukkot? You go to Sukkot, you go to the Feast of Tabernacles, and you feel like you can let your guard down. Because why? Because the food we're all eating, it's clean. We hope so. Some of us are still learning. But see, we can let our guard down a little bit. Because when we're out in the world, our guard is always up. What's going to come at me today? What challenges am I going to face that I have to be on guard for scripturally? But the family's under attack. We are under attack. And so we go to these places. Hobby Lobby's another one. And thankfully they haven't capitulated yet. But see, the enemy's going to keep trying. He's going to keep going because he sees these as places of refuge for God's people. Even though it's junk food or even though it's cheap art stuff made in China. It doesn't matter. There's a refuge there because of what the company supposedly or says outwardly they stand for. And that's offensive to the enemy. So, why attack the children? And this is, again, my opinion. It's because they're the leaders of what will be one day. They're the leaders of what will be one day. And if the enemy's going to attack what he knows will be one day, there's a good target for him if he's looking at the chessboard. Possibly. Just my opinion. But that's how I see it, and I make that case in that video. Why attack the family? Again, families produce children. You're looking at the chessboard. You're looking for the best way to best your opponent and to make him fail, to win the game. You can't win the game. You can't win the game against God, but he can sure beat you. It's still going to be you who pay when you give over to the lust of the flesh in this world. So we're going to go through a number of articles I want to share with you guys tonight, or to this afternoon. So this came out just the other day. I saw this and I was like, I'm going to stick this in the presentation because it really fits. This was written by a woman, Marley Solis, and she talks about a feminist. It says, we can have a feminist future without abolishing the family. And in her book, she talks about this. I'll put it up on screen so you can read it. In her book, Sophie Lewis advocated that all surrogacy should be state-controlled. That's pregnancy. Should be state-controlled. After all, pregnancy is labor. And we have labor laws for when you're on the job site. If you're working, moms, well then, because you're working at building a life, we need to include the state in that. After all, pregnancy is labor and actually requires work to build a human. As labor laws apply to other aspects of our lives, human gestation should be the same. You ever seen The Matrix? Did you guys see the movie The Matrix? Yes. All right, remember the little pods, how they grew their children? Yeah. Don't think that's not out of the realm of possibility. How many other movies, sci-fi movies, whatever, have you not seen the technologies in those movies come to fruition? Where do you think it comes from? Could it possibly be the enemy who's feeding that into our minds so that we can build it for later? Because after all, it's better. It's better. Complete surrogacy by the state. Take it out of. Because then, once we raise these children, we don't really get to decide what we do with them. And see, that's one of her issues that she has in that article. Because you're determining how you raise your child. If we're going to let a village raise the children, or raise the child, then we all as a village need to have a say-so in where that child goes after you birth it. Or in fact, you won't even birth it anymore. You'll figure out ways to take that out of your hands. Absolute insanity. That's the world we're in. She states that pregnancy is dangerous and over 1,000 women die every year of natural childbirth. Folks, more people died falling off a ladder last year than died in natural childbirth. So this is what they want to control. They're not controlling the ladders. They're controlling how your children are raised. Because the enemy doesn't like the way you're raising them. Most of these women, she states, are poor women and women of color. Yes, that's right. It's about social justice. She's the perfect social justice warrior. Because it's all for the children, it's about women who are of color and people who are poor. I'm just looking out for the poor person, don't you know? So let us have that job of raising your children. Let us have that job of having the babies. You don't need to do that. As fertility rates fall in the U.S., a gap widens between rural and urban counties. So this is something that me and Jamie were brainstorming this last year and the year before. This has kind of been in the works for a while. It's a really interesting article. Total fertility rates in this article, it says, fell across the U.S. during the last decade, even as the gap in rates widened between rural and metropolitan counties, according to a new report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So we're losing fertility rates. The age at which women become mothers also rose during the last decade, though gaps remain between rural and urban areas. In 2017, women had their first child on average at 27. In large metro areas, at an average of 25, in small and medium metro counties, and at 24 in rurals. They are in rural areas, rural counties. They are important to consider as rural areas lose access to critical health care services. Now, that doesn't sound like it makes a whole lot of sense here. It's just telling you that in the cities, people wait longer. In the rural areas, people have children sooner. Now, check this out. Everybody know what that is? He did a video about 2.5 years, 3 years ago that totally caught my attention. Totally caught my attention. I heard this video. I think I first found that video was on Facebook. It was being promoted. And I saw it, and I looked it up. I scoured YouTube until I found it on YouTube. He has his own channel, Bill Gates and the Bill and Gates Melinda Foundation. And so I went and I found that video. And here it is on YouTube. It's called, Does Saving More Lives Lead to Overpopulation? Because, they want to save lives. It's all about the children, don't you know? And he shows this chart in this video. It's a short video. It's only like 3 minutes long, maybe less. Short video. And it talks about world population and population growth. And that red line peaks right at about 1960. What happened in 1960? You had the 60s, the revolution, sexual revolution, and then you have, the Madeleine Mario O'Hare taking the Bible out of schools, Supreme Court decision, and so it peaks right about there, and it starts to take a pretty steep dive downwards. Now that is the annual growth rate of world population. Annual growth rate of world population. The blue line is world population. Okay, so you have the growth rate, and then you have the actual. And so the blue line, it starts to level off at about 2080. It starts to level off, but I'm here to tell you it's happening a lot sooner than that. So it starts to level off at around 2080. Okay, so some years from now. So remember the last article on urban and rural birth rates? Remember this article here? I just read it to you. As fertility rates fall in the U.S., gap widens between rural and urban counties. Well, in that video, he says the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down. Because, see, there's better health care in the city. It means there's more knowledge. That means there's less people, less births. We're trying to reduce the amount of births. And it's because we have better health care, don't you know? We're going to increase the health care and reduce the amount of people that are born. How are they doing that? There's lots of answers to that question. Birth control, vaccines, food that's horrible for you. And so it all reduces your health. It doesn't allow you to procreate. It's slowing down the commandment that the Father gave his people. Go forth and multiply, subdue the earth. U.S. fertility rate falls to all-time low, CDC says. This was last year's article. All-time low. We're at an all-time low right now. We're not even producing enough people to replace our population. The U.S. fertility rate is below level needed to replace population, study says. Only Utah, the Mormons, and South Dakota are meeting that standard. Everyone else is below. Everyone else is below. I'm suspecting as more Hebrews show up in Arkansas, we'll get that number up there. Well, because what do you see? When I was at Chick-fil-A, I'm looking around and there's all these families, and a lot of them are pretty big. They're taking up 2-3 tables, some of these families. Dad's at work, mom's got the kids at Chick-fil-A, and she's running around between the 3 tables, making sure everyone's got their food. You got ketchup, you got salt on your fries, you got this, you got that. You need some mayonnaise? Okay, I'll go get mayonnaise. And so it's a big family. There's a lot of them. And you come to our Sukkot, it's the same thing. There's always usually a family, at least one family there that's got like 11 kids. And you come to the conferences, let's see. All right, is there any families here who have 5 kids? Any families, 6 kids? 7? 8? 7? 8? 8 kids. And there's multiple families who had the number of children. But see, and tell me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, ladies. When you go out there and you start telling the random person that you have 8 children, they're like, what in the world were you thinking? How many times have you heard, do you know how those are made, right? Because the world looks down upon it. It looks down upon it. That's the world we live in today. And so what's needed is 2,100 per 1,000 women over their lifetime. So a woman has 2.1 children. That's what's needed to sustain the population. 2.1 children. I haven't figured out how you have a 0.1 yet, but that's the average they need. Okay, so 2,100 per 1,000 over their lifetime. And so we have a lot of families in our culture, in our circles, that have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. My neighbors down the road have 11. They have kids. But see, the rest of the world's not doing that. Can you see where I'm going now? Mightier than we. All right, we're going to get there. Keep that in mind. Almost half of U.S. births happen outside of marriage, signaling cultural shift. Because the births that are happening, many of them, the families aren't there. The dads aren't there. Most of the time it's the dad. The dad is missing. There used to be a stigma attached to unwed mothers. Forgiveness, yes, but not to condone. We can always be forgiven for our mistakes. We can always be forgiven for sin. But to condone bad behavior, that's not what the Bible teaches at all. This is go and sin no more. But those who have sinned can be forgiven and can be loved and cherished. In our neighborhood cemetery down the road where we have Jamie buried, we learned about this when we were going through that process. There was a little part of the cemetery over in the corner. It's got a few graves over there. And Tim asked, so what are those graves over there? I don't understand why they're so separate from the rest of the cemetery. Oh, that's the part where the unwed mothers went. Because they weren't allowed to be with the places where people were married and who did family decision away. And And that sounds horrible to do, but see, there used to be a shame associated with something. That's with a certain behavior. And it's all gone. And so if you take away the shame or repercussions of bad behavior, what happens? The behavior continues. I'm not saying to not forgive it, but we've come to a place now where we condone it. It's okay. You can do what you want. It's just your life. You live your life however you feel best you need to do it. Instead of telling them, no, wrong answer, there's a way that God says to live, and we're going to do it that way. And then you will be blessed. We don't do that anymore. But that neighborhood cemetery, that was back in the day when they did. That's not where we're at today. Again, remember the sin? It's open. It's in your face. There's no need to hide it. Hungary. Anybody hear about Hungary? Look at this. This is crazy. Have 4 or more babies in Hungary and you'll pay no income tax for life. See, there are a number of countries out there that are realizing, you know what, we're not producing enough to maintain our population and we're going to be in real trouble in a couple of decades. See, there's some forward thinkers, and really Hungary has a pretty good Christian population, Christian base, to their government and their culture. I knew a couple of missionaries who were over there. I'm like, Hungary, because I didn't know anything about Hungary. I thought maybe that was a Muslim country. And they're like, oh no, there's like 2% Muslims here. I think it's grown since then. But they're like, we see the issue with our population. We better start having kids. If we don't, we're going to lose our culture, we're going to lose our population, we're going to lose our economy because those kids grow up and they have jobs. And so they're thinking, hey, listen, you come here and you have 4 kids, no income tax for life. That's a sure way to get people to move there. Russia started doing the same thing about 25 years ago. You ever hear about this? They have the day of conception. A day where everyone gets off work, shops are closed, and you stay home with your spouse. Why? Because they realize the problem. They're trying to keep their culture alive. They're trying to keep their economy alive. They're trying to keep their people alive. If you heard of Japan lately, we'll get to Japan. Goodness gracious. But yeah, they have a day of conception every year in Russia. And then anyone who gives birth on June 12th, which is 9 months or approximately 9 months later, sometimes the women get free cars. They get, certain thousands of dollars worth of shopping cards and all kinds of stuff. All kinds of prizes if you have your child on June 12th. They make it a contest. But the West doesn't do that anymore. We don't do that. The majority of the world doesn't do that. I mean, Russia's a big country, but they're not that big in the scheme of things. They have a lot of land mass, but they don't have a lot of population. Most of the world does the exact opposite of that. And that's where the world's headed. Our real existential crisis, extinction. That's our real crisis right now. Everyone's talking about global warming. This is what this article's talking about. Everyone's talking about global warming or this or that. But our real crisis right now is keeping us alive. Keeping humanity alive. Remember the Georgia Guidestones? I didn't put this in the presentation. How many of you guys remember the Georgia Guidestones? How many of you have read it? Keep the population under 500 billion.
500 million.
Oh, I'm sorry, 500 million. Right, yeah, right. 500 million? Yep. That's crazy. There's a lot of people who are going to have to perish if they're going to get to that number. So the article reads like this. For many first world countries, there are more compelling concerns. High among them is population decline. And if birth rates do not rise, the nearest extinction of many Western peoples by this century's end. Consider. Did Steve write this article? Consider. The number of births in Japan fell in 2019 to a level unseen since 1874, around 900,000. But there were 1.4 million deaths for a net loss of 512,000 people, or 512,000 Japanese. An even larger loss in Japan's population is expected this year. Okay, last year, they lost 500,000 people. It doesn't take long. In fact, I've been reading studies over the last few years once this whole idea for this presentation was in my mind, and I was watching 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. I was paying attention to the article. Every year there's an article that comes out after the year passes and give the previous year's numbers for Japan, and they say, oh, this is going to be the year 2134, whatever it was. Okay, a couple hundred years in the future. 2134, Japan will be extinct. It's funny because, oh no, it's 23. First it was like 2600, then 2300 or 2400. Anyway, it was basically getting less. Every year the article came out by 100 years. And last year they lost 500,000 people. It's snowballing. It's getting so bad in Japan. The death of the West is not a prediction of what's going to happen. It is a description of what is happening now. First world nations are dying. They face a mortal crisis, not because of something happening in the third world, but because of what is not happening at home in the homes of the first world. Our culture is against families. And so there you go. There's the reason. There's the Chick-fil-A. We go where we know other people think like us. Everyone wants to go to a place like that. It's like Cheers. It's what makes these feasts so attractive. Because we can put our guard down. Because we know what happens in my house probably happens in your house. We value certain things. The world today doesn't do that. This article came out last year. Should I have let my daughter marry our robot? Anybody ever listen to Drudge? Watch the Drudge Report? A few hands? Okay, the Drudge Report. Drudge Report is basically a collection of headlines. It changes every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it gives you the latest headlines from major news sources around the country and sometimes around the world, especially in the Western world. And if you've been listening to or watching the Drudge Report over the last several years, you know that they have a giant fascination with robots. And for a specific purpose. For a partner. And so, this is becoming normal. They're gearing our minds so that you don't need to just, not only do you not need to have kids anymore and surrogacy, you don't need to do that. We'll take care of that as a state. But in fact, if you want a partner, you don't even need a human anymore. It's the attack of the family. Why is this getting so much publicity? And if you haven't heard about it, you know, in the news sources, or if you don't watch the news, I'm telling you, it's getting more and more popular to think that way. That's crazy. That's directly against the Father's commandments. That's directly against the plan He had for His people, for His creation. Tragedy of the European family. So this article came out in 2018. I saved it because I wanted to make it one day a part of this presentation. Because I think nothing drives home the point more than this one does. If I haven't made the point yet of the attack on a family, I think this will do it. Emmanuel Macron, everybody know who that is? President of France. The newly elected French president has no children. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has no children. British Prime Minister Theresa May has no children. Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni has no children. Holland's Prime Minister Mark Rutte, Sweden's Stefan Löfven, Luxembourg's Premier Patel, and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon all have no children. Did you know that? The list goes on. Latvia's childless president is Roman, I can't pronounce that. Lithuania's childless president, Dalia, and Romania's childless president is Klaus Werner. And Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission, too, has no children in his family list. These are the people leading Europe, leading the West. These are the people that leaders in our country are trying to emulate. So to put it rather bluntly, a grossly disproportionate, now this is from the article, a grossly disproportionate number of people making serious decisions about Europe's future have no direct personal sibling, child, or grandchildren's interest in the stake of that future. They are not part of a family and have come to see their all attention focused on one dominant and all-powerful social unit to which they pay loyalties and give their complete and devoted attention. state. That's scary. Is that why a certain group in this country hates Trump so much? Because he has so many kids? I know he's been divorced a couple times. But the guy has children. Can't say that for most of the world leaders today, especially in the West. What does it all mean? And again, I'm not trying to bring politics into this. I'm not trying to be pro-Trump or anti-Trump. You know, if you watch my channel, I didn't even vote in the last election because I already have a team. The enemy hates children. Why? The enemy hates families. Why? Again, we're looking at the chessboard. Looking at the chessboard and trying to figure out what's he doing. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to our kids? And I see a lot of depressing things, but I also see reasons for great joy. I see reasons for hope. I don't want to leave you depressed here because we know how the game ends. We know how the chessboard ends up. And the enemy's checkmated. There's an old saying, I love this saying, a ship is safest in the harbor, but that's not the reason for which it was built. Because if you go out to sea, yeah, you may lose a ship. But if you don't go out to sea, what's your loss then? The role of a mother, this is one of the things I put together with Jamie. The role of a mom. She births the child. She lays down the hull of the ship. Nurturer, she gives the ship its seaworthiness. See, it takes these parents to come together to build children that will go out into this world. And sometimes you lose a ship. But see, you build good ships, and then they do great things. The mother births the child, lays down the hull. She nurtures the child, gives the ship seaworthiness, immunity. She breastfeeds it, something that's looked down upon also today. She builds its immunity through that process. The father, the direction. He instills direction in that child, which builds the rudder. Gives that ship the ability to move left, right. A purpose, the hold to the decks. What is the purpose of the ship? What's it carrying? Is it carrying the gospel? What is it doing in life? Discipline. Or is it a pirate ship? Discipline, the rigging and the sails. See, a ship without rigging and sails doesn't go anywhere. It can have a rudder, but what's to move it? What's the propulsion? The father brings that to the game. The shipbuilding process. The mother builds the ship. She nurtures the ship. She brings the ship into existence. She allows it to hold water. But then the father comes and he gives it direction. He gives it discipline. He gives it a purpose. So that ship can do great things. There's some verses, a lot of verses in your Bible that talk about ships and talk about direction. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way in which you shall go, and I will guide you with my eye. See, it takes a father to direct that. We have our Heavenly Father. He gives us the direction in which we shall go. It's His Torah. It says, you'll either get this from blessing, you'll get blessings or curses if you keep my commandments. You'll either get to your port, or you'll end up lost at sea somewhere. And we have a lot of people in this world right now who are lost at sea because they didn't have good shipbuilders. Isaiah 43:16, thus says the Lord, which makes a way in the sea and a path in the mighty waters. So you can make a path in the mighty waters because you have the sails. You can displace the water because you had a good mom, and you can have direction because you have a good father. Isaiah 48:17, I am the Lord your God, who teaches you to profit, who leads you in the way you should go. See, that's the thing, you're a ship. The whole purpose of a ship, usually a merchant ship, is to bring profit. If you go the way in which you're to go. You go the way you're supposed to go, and your ship is successful. Your crew is successful. And you can all take part in that success. Ephesians 4:12. For the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Messiah, till we all come in the unity of the faith, and all the knowledge of the Son of God, into a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Messiah. That we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Now, we were talking, and we were talking about someone that we care about who went astray. And it's the parable of the sower. Anytime people come to me and they're saying, Zach, I got this friend, or, he just not doing this, or he was really involved in church and really loved God, and now this has happened to him, and he's not interested at all. It's the parable of the sower. I talk about the whole once saved, always saved. I believe in once saved, always saved, because if you're his, he'll bring you back, and you'll be saved. But if you don't, you weren't his to begin with. So people are like, Zach, do you believe once saved, always saved? Not really. But I do, kind of. Because I don't think he'll let you go. We've all come to in points, and I love the way Ray Comfort puts it. There's a difference between a believer falling into sin and a non-believer diving into it. We all fall into sin. We're all not perfect. But some of us have been pulled from the fire, right? I believe that. And so when we were talking about our friend, and we would pray that the Father would pull him out of the fire because we love him. He's made some great mistakes. And we all know people like that. People who were tossed to and fro, like this verse talks about, and carried away with every wind of doctrine, being led astray by the sleight of man and the cunning craftiness. Because the world's attractive. We put our kids out there in it, and if we haven't built a good ship, we haven't it may hold off water, but see, why is the father so under attack in a family today? The father can be easily removed. For a child to be born, there has to be a mother. That just has to be it. Hopefully there's been some nurturing. But why is the father so often removed from the family? It's because he provides that direction, that sail, that rudder, that discipline. And having a good rudder, having a good sail, can keep that child, help to keep that child from the cunning craftiness, being tossed to and fro, and carried away with every wind of doctrine. Because when you encounter those winds, you can go a different direction. You have that ability. The way the enemy has decided to attack the family is to draw away the fathers. Hath God said? Let's see, here's the father's creation, and now I'm going to pull the father away from him by asking questions. This is the Isaiah 46:10 conference, declaring the end from the beginning. What happened at the beginning? Someone questioned the Father and pulled the Father away from his creation. That's what's happening in the families today. The families are being pulled apart. Most of the time, not all, most of the time, it's the Father being pulled away from that family. Just like it was at the beginning. The end from the beginning. The beginning, hath God said, question mark. The end, it's the same thing. Has God really said, question mark? Did God really tell you that the Torah is valid? Did God really tell you that you shouldn't eat pork? Did God really tell you that you should worship Him and only Him? That you should have a heart for no other? Did God really say that? Does He really mean that? This whole universalism thing that's going around is making me sick. Because you know what? All we need to do is, it's going through the Christian churches, the denominational churches. The hardcore ones like Lutheran and Methodist and Baptist, Southern Baptist. These giant denominations is going through because they're being watered down. And people are falling for it. God is just, the Bible is just, it's literary, but we need to stop taking it serious. It's just literally, it's art. It's just art. We can interpret it how you want. That's what I see today. Hath God said? Did He really mean what He said? Is to draw His creation away from the Father. What does our culture teach? Dads are stupid. I see it over and over again, and that's one of the reasons I got rid of my TV years ago. It's because the commercials make all the commercials. You ever see a commercial? Very, very rarely do you see a commercial make mom look out to be stupid. Well, we all make dumb choices in our life. That's what life is. But it's always the dad who's the idiot. Promotes distractions to draw men in. Sports, pornography, video games, TV in the home. when I talk about TVs, the majority of the comments I get are from women on my videos. Why? It was the same reason when Jamie, I was at work, she's sitting down where we lived in an apartment in St. Louis, and our kids are sitting down watching the TV. And they're just, well, it was only one child then, Joshua. But they're just looking at him. She's just looking at the TV like, and she looked at that and her heart broke. She said something in her mind, and her motherly instinct says, this is wrong. This is not right. And she came home, I came home and we talked about it. I said, let's get rid of it. And she was so grateful because something in her motherly instinct told her this is hurting your child. Because a mom knows when something's hurting her child. It's that women's intuition, it's real. They see things sometimes a man will not see. That's why I believe the Father gave them as a helpmate. Because they're there to advise and help us with things when we don't see them. Men, how many men are colorblind in this room? One. Any women colorblind? No, you're not a woman, you have a beard. Usually you get about 2 or 3. Are you colorblind, sir? Are you colorblind? Okay, so we have two colorblind men in this room and no women. You want to know why? Because women have an extra chromosome in their eye. I talked to him when I was at a business meeting. I talked to an optometrist. He was there at the meeting. And he told me all this. And immediately my mind went to Scripture. Women see things you don't, men. Hey, look what happened to Eve. They're not always right. So don't get on a high horse. Well, she was deceived because I believe Adam wasn't there. The Father was not there at the time. But in keeping with the Father's commandments, if we're walking that out together as a couple, a husband and wife, you will have so much more success if men, you listen to your wives. And some of the times they will say, Jamie would do it all the time, Zach, I don't feel right about this. We were doing something, doing whatever, involved in whatever project, I just don't feel right about this. And about 95% of the time, or higher, she was right. Because it turned out bad. Something went wrong. Because women have an intuition. Women's intuition is real. My point is, get rid of that TV. I mean, we watch movies here and there. We still have a screen, our laptops we use, but I get it. There's some things that's good for education. I'm not saying, but the networks and all this stuff, the nonsense that's out there, get rid of it, guys. And it's the guys usually who fight against the wives about getting rid of that TV. But the wives, I get the emails, the moms see what it's doing to their kids. They see dads at work, and they see the kids just staring at that screen. And something inside their being says, no, stop it, it's wrong. Dads should lead, protect, and provide for their families. That's what the culture says today. You don't need to do that. That's a whole article of that feminist who wanted to take surrogacy away from their mothers. We don't need these people we don't need them to lead or protect or provide for our families at home. We don't need dads to do that. We can do that. Women can do that. Proverbs 4:2. For I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law, forsake ye not my Torah. This is a father speaking to a son. That's the context of that verse. For I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law, forsake ye not my Torah. It's good. In fact, Psalms 19:7 says it's perfect. You can't make something that's perfect more perfect. It's an absolute. It's perfect. What he made better was the covenant. The people who signed the agreement, because their heart was not in it the first time. And these people that he brings back from the nations in this Exodus, that physical Exodus, the heart will be in it this time. It'll be in their hearts and on their minds to obey, to want to obey, to go out of their way, literally go out of their way to obey, because they want to. So what does this mean for God's people? I believe in these last days the Father will give protection and direction to his bride, us. Just like he did for those in Egypt. He gave them protection and direction. The difference will be that we will have a heart and mind set apart for him. They didn't have it the first time. They wandered in the desert. We won't test him. We're just still going to have rebels. I'll show you that verse in a second. But we won't test him like they did. From the very beginning to the very end, they tested him. And they rebelled. And they questioned him. Ezekiel 20, 34 through 35. And I will bring you out from the people, and I will gather you out from the countries where you were scattered. With a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm. This is not talking about Egypt, but it sounds an awful lot like it. Why? Because it's the same thing. And with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the people, and there I will plead with you face to face. Just like the first time. He pled with them face to face at Mount Sinai. And he's going to do that again. And I will purge out from among you the rebels and them that transgress against me, and I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Lord. See, there's going to be people who, just like the first time, get while the getting is good, because their oppressors have been beaten back. We can leave. You don't think if there's a giant pillar of fire, a whole bunch of people aren't going to go to it? Because it talks about that's going to happen again. Of course they're going to go to it. But there's going to be people who are like, you know what, I'm not giving up my pork rinds. I like my bacon bits. You know? So, and the Father's like, no, you'll have no other idols before me. You'll obey. And there'll be people who say, I don't want to do that. And they'll be purged out the second time. But unlike the first time, there will not be a group of people, a majority of them will not question. They will be there with their whole heart. Because all these men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, have tested me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice. They were testing him over and over and over again. So what does this mean for God's people? It means preparing your children, building endurance. I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to keep going. Preparing our children, building endurance. When it comes to preparing our children, number one, teach them history. You start in the Bible. Show them where people have made mistakes in the past so they don't make them in the future. Right? Those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. You remember that hopefully in school at some point. Hopefully you're still teaching that. Teach them history. Me and Jamie both agree. The number one subject your children ought to be learning, not math, science, it's history. Because that's where the mistakes are made. And that's where you learn those mistakes and then not make them yourself. Teach them that they are not immune to struggle. We live in a society where it's great to be comfortable. We don't want to sweat. We have air conditioning. We have heaters, and everything is about comfort. It's become a sickness in our Western world. Teach them that they're not immune to struggles. They're going to go through struggles. If you teach them that now, they won't lose their faith when they encounter it later. Make sense? Teach them the parable of the sower. The very first parable, the very first amount of scripture we wanted our boys to memorize was that. Because you're going to encounter it over and over and over again in your life ad nauseum. You're going to see people come into the faith and then fall away. And you're going to ask yourself why. You're going to see things in your life that's going to want you to make you fall away from the faith, be angry at the Father for the circumstance you find yourself in. And you're going to recall that parable and you're going to say, am I a seed that fell on rocky ground, or am I a seed that gets picked up by the birds, or am I on good soil that I may grow and bring fruit, some 50, some 100. Building endurance. Do Sukkot, camp. I believe this is training for God's people one day. We go through these things as a memorial, yes, but there's a purpose for doing this. The family that camps together stays together. And I'm not talking about glamping. It's okay, but don't do the Sukkot in the fifth wheel. Don't do the Sukkot at the Holiday Inn. I know it's hard. Every year, there are moms who come to our Sukkot and they're crying at some point through the week. Am I right? And because it's hard. But you know what? Every year it gets easier and easier. It gets easier. You learn to deal with putting up a tent. And you learn to deal with hauling water, or purifying the water, or making a campfire, or cooking dinner over a makeshift Coleman stove with propane. And you learn to get out of your element. Or this guy here, you do some coke with him. He's got this giant barbecue pit that's the size of a truck. Anyway, you just camp next to that guy. Okay, but see, you get out of your element. It's the Father's way of training His people and teaching. So you wonder why, when we first started doing Sukkot in our area, there were small Sukkots. I was actually one of the larger ones, 100 people. Now there's Sukkots in the Ozarks that number 1,000 people. Yeah, and I know sometimes we're doing it at different times, but we're doing it. How many Sukkots was there in the Ozarks 10 years ago? Probably 2 or 3. It wasn't like the numbers they have now. Anyone can come to the Ozarks and find a Sukkot. They're everywhere. Memorize Scripture. That's how you build endurance. Because when things happen to you, circumstances, Scripture will pop into your head. And will get you through that time. You'll remember the promises the Father gave His people. That's you. And it'll get you through those times. So memorize Scripture. Mark 13:13. And you shall be hated of all. You should be hated of all for my name's sake. But he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. He that will endure. It's endurance. It's about preparing ourselves, our kids, our families. Guys, I want to believe that we're close. But I don't know. And part of me thinks that we're not. Because the reality is, you have a few similarities between Egypt and now. The killing of babies, okay? The mockery of people who believe in God. The Egyptians were doing that to the Hebrews, okay? But see, there's also something we're missing. You know what it is? It's the massive amount of crying out to the Father for deliverance. He says, I heard their cry, and I had respect unto them. Because he remembered there was a promise. I don't think he ever forgot. But that's what the text says. But see, we're not doing that yet. Not doing it like they did it. We're not under a burden yet, a real, true burden. Right now we have it pretty easy in this country. Even though there's a lot of people attacking us, making fun of us, laughing. A lot of times, historically speaking, if you study history, that laughing turns to violence. And turns to outright hatred. So we're not under a true burden yet. When that comes, I don't know. Is it 5 years out, 2 years out? An election cycle out? 10 years out, 30 years out, I don't know. But Brad Scott was supposed to be here this week. And one of the messages I loved about him so much was that, we all think something might happen tomorrow, but we better be training these future generations for what might happen in their tomorrow. So think of it that way. Amen. Prepare your families, prepare your kids, because there's a hope. Parents, it's your job to see it that your children have the ability to endure. Train up your children. Train them to endure. All right, now, where's Philip? Do I got time for questions, or we do that? Okay, because I know I'm about my time. So, does anybody have any questions on this? If not, I'll be at my. It's Cassie's table. I just kind of hijacked it. I'm really a stowaway. I was supposed to have my own, but I didn't get a chance to do it. So, yes, sir. I'm saying that the authority was given to family in the book of Genesis, absolutely. Be fruitful. Right. Be fruitful. Right. All authority is given to the family. That's why it's under attack. Absolutely. Anything else? What we got? Yes, sir.
My church, Shavua Muna, we decided because we're doing a Bible study with Brad Scott right now, and he's very thoroughly going over Genesis, and we're learning Hebrew and just beginning with it. And then this news comes out. We prayed about it because we decided to send him a love gift. So if you guys have a church, consider doing that to help him out with all the bills you're looking. My wife found out that she might have cancer, and while she found out that she might have cancer, she found out she might have cancer in 2 different areas. And a procedure that was already scheduled was on top of it. And so we got hit with all this stuff. And and I'm building a shop. And now I'm not building a shop anymore because we don't have any debt on all that stuff, and the cancer is not there. I mean, it came back negative.
Right,
We were getting all at once.
Right.
We saw every area. We were getting, bills in the mail, and it was crazy. But to help him out right now through this, bless his family, let him know we're praying for him. I think that's good.
Absolutely, it's good to reach out, and you may not be able to expect a response, but I appreciated that when you all did that for me. It's not just for people who, like me or Brad. When you find someone who is sick, when you find someone in the body who is going through this, I tell you, it's the most horrible and horrific time that they'll ever encounter, especially for their family and for them. So it's scary. So reach out to anyone who has this. There's one thing this has given me is a heart of empathy more than anything. So so we're going to keep Brad in our prayers, and if you can help out, maybe talk to that gentleman. But we're all struggling along with Brad. Yes, sir.
So, just a quick question in regards to the idea of family, and this has to do with abortion. Encountering a situation where a woman ends up pregnant and she wants to abort, but the father does not. How should the father approach that, given that legally he technically has no say?
Yeah, he legally has no say. There's nothing he can do, not in this society. I mean, there's some states that have certain laws, I think, that you can, it depends on where you live. Most states don't. So, that's the world we live in. And see, it's that kind of thing, the bondage that he's under, that should make him and others cry out for deliverance. Because only when we cry out for that deliverance, because it's on our heart, we really, truly are on our knees crying out, Father, why are you not delivering your people? That's what they did in the book of Exodus at the very beginning. He heard their cries of bondage. And see, it's only going to get worse. And until the father people really begin to cry out, he's going to wait. I believe, because what's he going to send? Yeshua. Salvation. If he's not going to send salvation until someone, his son who already has defeated death, until we beg for it, until we ask for it. We're not even doing that in many cases today. Yes. A couple more. We're going to end. Go ahead. We'll do you. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is a question or a statement or anything, but, we see so many in Torah right now who are starting to homestead and who are going away from the culture. And in one sense, I get that, and I really want to do that because that's the way I would like to live. But at the same time, due to certain circumstances, in the last couple of years, I've been put into a job that I'm in a place where I never thought I would work, and I never realized what a Christian Bible was.
Right.
And now I work in people who are steeped in this culture, and I'm alien for it. They have no idea what to do with me, and God is using me in such great ways to, I haven't baptized anybody, and I haven't done, haven't had evangelists, but I had a guy the other day, gay guy, tell a girl who was going on about religious people, don't say that's kind of ginger, she's not a I just wonder what you think about that, whether we should temper our retreating to the woods and our being out there in the world.
Right.
Because God has called them the same way He called us. And the fact that they have a cancer, they're precious people.
Absolutely. And the Father doesn't want any of them to perish. So you be a light, you can be a light. Okay? I can tell you just from my own experience, the biggest reason we moved out to the woods and started to live this lifestyle as a homestead was because that's how I wanted Scripture to come alive to me. Until you live that lifestyle, until you live the lifestyle of Abraham and some of these other patriarchs and some of the people in our Scriptures lived, so much of the Scripture, and I have a whole series I've done a talk a couple years ago here. I did a talk on that, the agricultural roots of the Hebrew people. So much of the Bible will become alive to you once you begin to live out that lifestyle and do things, hauling your water. It's amazing, Jamie had a big thing about the water at the well. it was always women at the well. Why? There's reasons for that. And it didn't click to her until she had done it herself. That she went back to scripture and a whole bunch of light bulbs went off. That's a whole other topic I don't have time to get into. But, I mean, so scripture comes alive when you go back and you live the lifestyle the people who wrote it lived. That's the main reason for me. And I think it's the main reason for a lot of people. Also, we do see what's coming. The Father, if you're in those places, if you're in those cities, the Father will guide you, protect you. He'll bring the lame, the blind, and the people in the cities. We know that. We have scriptural precedent for that. So if that's where you feel like you can be a light, then be a light there. And be a bright one, as bright as you can be. Okay? And when the knock comes on the door and says time to go, go. Right? But be a light.
Unfortunately, we're outside and I drive in.
Okay.
To get there.
Right.
But it's so eye-opening.
Yeah. Yeah, there's people who need to hear the truth. And so, I mean, they hear it through video and internet today. But yeah, I wanted to raise my kids in a way where scripture would come alive to them. That's why we do it.
John the Baptist preached in the wilderness, and yet Jonah preached in the city. It's all where the Father calls you.
Right. It's where the Father brings you. Right. Yes, ma'am.
When I was 15 weeks pregnant, I was convinced that my daughter didn't have a chance, and I thought I needed to preserve my life for my son, that was the same. And come to find out years later, I met a woman who the same doctor told me the same thing, and has an adult teenage daughter that would be my daughter's age. And God is merciful that we were able to adopt some kids. And I think a big thing about abortion is that believers, even if you have a mustard seed of faith, you need to adopt or foster, especially find mothers that would otherwise abort. And I think we have a community that can support each other.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Phil? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Zach.